Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the story about Naruto. What if Naruto married with Ino Yamanaka? Part 10. Hope you'll enjoy this video. So before we start, please do support for more awesome content and also hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And also support the creator of this fanfic. I have created a playlist where you can find out all the previous parts of this video, link in the description, and check out the other video as well. So let's start the video. The Sandaime dozed fitfully behind his desk, his joints stiff and sore. It had been one of his favorite pastimes when he had first become Hokage, but now it was painful. Giving up on his nap, he opened his eyes, staring at his empty office and feeling the crushing weight more than ever. This was not his time. He was not supposed to be Hokage. Kami, it wasn't fair. He was tired and sore. He shook the feelings off quickly. What was painful to him now but a constant companion? He was Hokage, and it was pointless to complain about things that couldn't be changed. Yondaime was dead. That was karma. Anko had risked Naruto's life. That was karma. Speaking of Naruto and Anko, according to Kakashi, they were supposed to be returning today. Looking at the clock on the wall, he raised an eyebrow, watching the minutes tick past. Sighing, he shook his head. They should have been here an hour ago. A moment later, Kakashi and the other two entered, and Sandaime sighed. Of course, the copycat ninja would be in the lead, and of course the entire group would be late. Naruto blinked, looking around, and Anko rolled her eyes. Ah, Kakashi-san, Naruto-kun. Anko-san, Sandaime said, then, noticing Anko's wince, fixated on Naruto. Ah, would you mind sitting down, Naruto-kun? We have something rather important to discuss. The blonde blinked uncertainty, then, glancing at Anko, moved to the chair in front of Sandaime's desk and sat down. Okay, yo Billy Goat, what you wanna talk about? The Sandaime blinked, then shook his head, allowing the casualness to slide for the moment. Far more important problems were going on at the moment. Naruto, Sandaime said, clearing his throat as he stared at the blonde ninja across from him. He paused for a moment, realizing that there really was no other word to describe him. Sandaime had seen those eyes before, the set of that jaw. Everything screamed ninja. For the first time, he seriously began to consider the boy's potential as a possible successor. Ah, the Yondaime would have been so proud. Hokage-sama? Kakashi asked, interrupting his stroll down memory lane. Huh? Oh, yes, sorry, Sandaime said, berating himself for going off into his memories. Shifting his attention back to the curious boy, he sighed, lacing his fingers together. Naruto, before anything else, I just want to say I'm proud of you. You seem to be growing up. Just a few months ago, you'd have been pulling some wild prank or causing a ruckus, and now well, instead of a troublemaker, I have a ninja standing in front me. Well, thanks, Naruto said, sounding pleased even as he scratched at his cheek absently. Now, then, Sandaime said seriously, lowering his eyes to a folder on his desk. You remember that you underwent an exam not too long ago, correct? Huh, yeah, Naruto growled. That bastard. Kakashi-san did exactly as his job required, Sandaime interrupted seriously, looking up at the blonde. It is the exam, however, that I wish to discuss. Naruto, have you ever noticed anything odd about yourself? Like how fast you heal? No, I heal like everyone else, right? Sandaime exchanged a glance with Kakashi, then chuckled. Not quite. Actually, most people would love to heal the way you do. Wow, well, that's sorta neat, Naruto said, blinking. So, can I go train now? Cause I want Anko to show me some more wind jutsu. In a minute, Sandaime interrupted, then paused, considering how best to reveal this information. Maybe not all the details, as it would confuse the poor boy, and nothing about the Yondaime for obvious reasons. Then he realized that he had the easiest way to explain things right before him. You know about bloodlines, correct? Iruka-sensei mentioned them once, I think, Naruto said with a shrug. I kinda slept through that class. Well, okay, Sandaime said, drumming his fingers against his desk. Okay, within the world of ninja, there are certain abilities. These are called family abilities and advanced bloodlines. Family abilities are skills or jutsu that can be taught. Boy, like how Anko's teaching me. Exactly, Sandaime said with a nod. Only, the family abilities aren't taught outside of a family and are very jealously guarded. Advanced bloodlines, on the other hand, can't be taught at all. They have to be inherited and are unique to only certain families. You mean like how do the Uchiha all have that weird eye thing? The Sharingan, Sandaime said, smiling slightly. Yes, now then these advanced bloodlines are frowned upon by some people. Well, that's stupid. Yes, it is. Sandaime nodded. So, Konoha is seen as a refuge for advanced bloodlines since we openly embrace them. Even encourage them. But some, by the time they reach us, are already dying out, and we can do nothing to stop this. Sometimes, only a single child from these lost clans will have the ability and never know it. Most often, these become villagers, and the bloodline disappears. Okay, Naruto said slowly. So, why are you telling me about all of that? Haven't you ever wondered, Naruto-kun, Kakashi suddenly said from his spot near the wall, why exactly did you come through that incident in the hospital? Even, as an enemy planned you should have died. Well, yeah, but Naruto trailed off, frowning. In the exam you took, among other tests, is one to locate advanced bloodlines, Sandaime continued seriously. We found one, though there are no previous records of the ability. I have an advanced bloodline? Yes, Sandaime said, leaning back in his seat. It's called the Tenkichiyu. It's a rather handy ability too. Provided you don't take an attack that kills you immediately, you'll live through pretty much anything. We think. Sandaime explained, then paused, watching the boy closely. He could see the surprise and the fear washing over his face. Then the anger, and then a sort of calm that had him slightly worried. Naruto-kun, are you okay? Oi, I'm fine, Naruto said, looking at him in that carefree way. Can I go now? Yes, Sandaime said, sitting forward. Naruto, one thing, your ability, I would caution against talking about it with too many people. Maybe only the ones you trust most. Oi, I'm not Sasuke, Naruto said indignantly, before jumping to his feet and bolting for the door. Later. The Sandaime stared after him for a moment, worried, then shook it off, looking at Anko. She looked slightly worried, but when she looked at him, he saw the familiar defiant fire in her eyes. You shouldn't have let him go. Maybe, Sandaime said blandly. Anko-san, tell me something. What made Naruto so important that you'd kidnap him out of the village for a mission? Huh? Well, I was just wondering, Sandaime said with a shrug. After all, you never asked for permission. Never cleared it with Hayate-san, who could have had a mission or team training planned. You merely took the boy out of the village on a mission he was not cleared for. But he did fine. Anko said heatedly. Better than fine. Yes, Sandaime said tiredly. But that is not the point. You showed poor judgment and risked his life needlessly. That isn't the point either. I entrusted you with that mission, and for you to act so rashly. But. Anko-san, please. I am tired, and it's been a long day. I would appreciate it if you left. He saw the various emotions on her face and then watched as she stood, turned, and walked out of the office. Turning to Kakashi, he lowered his voice to a whisper. Fetch Kakashi-san. Yes, Kakashi said seriously. I do think you were a bit harsh. I mean, your original goal was to get Anko and Naruto to heal each other, and, on the way back, she was almost normal. I'd even say a sister to him. Yes, Sandaime said, feeling a chill race along his spine. I am aware of that, and by first denying her access and then questioning her judgment toward him, I am making her aware of how important he is to her. Which will pull them closer together. Ah, Kakashi said simply. Yes, now, Kakashi-san please. Nodding, Kakashi hurried out of the room, allowing the Sandaime to relax and massage his chest. He was no doctor, but he could feel the sands in the hourglass falling more rapidly than ever. One of the first things Shino's father had taught him was that the Aburam were not the masters of the bugs that lived inside them. It was a partnership, almost a marriage, and to abuse one's Kakachu family was the same as abusing one's wife or child. To complicate matters, there was the emotional and mental connection between host and bugs, which could affect the relationship. This was the reason behind the curious and slightly worrisome, near-constant placid state all Aburam maintained. Keeping all of this in mind, Shino had set out a week ago to re-establish the trust and balance in his relationship with his Kakachu family. It had been a strained and tedious affair, but finally they were working as one once more, though they were still a tad skittish. Still, as he concentrated and sent his desire to form a wall, they responded quickly. Finally able to perform the Mushi Cabe no Jutsu without falling apart, Shino allowed them a moment to rest. Sitting under a tree once more, he quietly considered everything that had happened since gaining Naruto as a teammate. Some of it was hard to fathom, some of it easy, and he was still no closer to answering his original concern about the effect of Naruto's chakra on his family. None of them could even suggest an explanation, and his father, when they had briefly spoken, had been unhelpful. Shaking it off, Shino climbed to his feet one last time, silently checking with his family that they were ready for this final exercise for the day. Receiving confirmation, he nodded and sent his desire to them. The bugs hesitated and then finally began to move, albeit slowly, into a vaguely humanoid shape. Satisfied with that, Shino cast the wordless hinge to create his own likeness over the bugs. This stage of the mushy bunshin no jutsu cleared, he took a moment to catch his breath and then nodded slightly. Let's begin. The mushy clone nodded in response and charged toward him with a basic round kick, which caught Shino by surprise. The stoic ninja merely went with the blow, as he had learned, performing a side roll before regaining his feet with just enough time to catch the incoming punch from the mushy clone. This was followed by a hooking leg sweep, which took out the clone's feet and sent it crashing into the earth. A minute later, the clone became once more his Kakachu family, all of whom were quite pleased with the brief match. Shino himself shared their sentiment, congratulating them as they all made their way back to their home in his body. While not instantaneous like his father's, it was effective, and it would improve over time. Looking around, he took a breath, then exhaled, wondering what he should do now that they had re-established trust between them. He could practice even more, but he felt that would be overtaxing for both them and himself, which meant he should go back to the Aburam home and read through the family scrolls. It would be best to know and understand as much as he could, even if the library had been severely damaged during the Kyuubi's attack. Nodding, with hands in his pockets, he started back toward his house. For some reason the village looked different to him, almost unreal. Naruto wasn't sure why or how, all he knew was that it was different. The vendors were all around, talking loudly, a few shooting him dark glares, others ignoring him. Yet, it was also different and strange. He had a bloodline. He could slit that man's throat without breaking a sweat. What had his father been like? His mother? He could rob that shopkeeper and never be caught. Did he have brothers? Where was his family? Dead? Had they just abandoned him? He had a bloodline. His thoughts were disrupted when he ran into something solid, which sent him tumbling on his ass. Looking up with a glare, ready to shout at whatever had done that to him, he found himself staring up at Iruka. The scarred Chunin blinked and looked down, surprise on his face. Naruto? Iruka-sensei? Naruto managed, realizing just how long it had actually been since he had seen the older man. Wow, Iruka said, holding a hand out to help him up. It's been a while. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, though, huh? Yeah, Naruto said noncommittally, then remembered to smile brightly. I'm getting really strong and awesome. I'll be Hokage soon, no doubt. Iruka raised an eyebrow and then smiled back, reaching out to miss his hair fondly. I bet you will be. For some reason, Naruto felt the smile on his face become more natural, despite the fact that he used to hate having that done. Then he blinked, realizing what time it was. Hoi, aren't you supposed to be teaching class? Well, actually, Iruka said, scratching the side of his nose, I'm just waiting for my latest teaching assistant to get the kids together. We're having class outside today. Naruto said, crossing his arms as he nodded. He had turned and taken 2 steps when Iruka grabbed the back of his jacket and held him in place. Hoi, let me go. Hold on, Iruka said, a smirk on his face. You know, I was just thinking about who to ask to speak to the class today. Naruto managed, twisting around to stare at the man in befuddlement. What the hell are you talking about? I know you slept and skipped class a lot, Iruka said reproachfully, but you do remember when we had the Hokage come by to talk to you, right? Or that time we got Haruno-san. Naruto blinked, his memory hazy on the exact details. Hoi, didn't they talk to us about being ninja or something? Exactly, Iruka said, releasing his jacket. This time, I was thinking about getting someone closer to the age of the recently graduated genin. Naruto blinked, then felt a chill race up his spine as suspicion crept into his mind. Iruka couldn't want him, but why no? Naruto was just imagining it. Besides, what could he say to a bunch of, not that Iruka was actually meaning that he wanted him to Okami, this was not a good idea. So, what do you think? Iruka said, his smirk now a grin. What the hell would I say? Iruka shrugged, but his grin never faded. Just talk to them, explain what it's like being a ninja. Naruto frowned, kicking at the ground absently. This was the last thing he needed or wanted to do. Maybe if he hadn't just found out about his bloodline, it was all too complicated, too confusing, and hurtful. He would never admit it out loud, but this entire ordeal had reopened the raw wounds concerning his family. Still, looking at Iruka, he couldn't bring himself to say no. After all, Iruka had been the first one to really acknowledge him as a ninja. He owed it to the older man. Okay, Naruto finally said. Iruka patted his shoulder and nodded. Great, I really appreciate this. Come on, we don't want to be late. Both walked in silence for several minutes before Iruka checked his watch. We need to hurry, come on. The man took off, and Naruto followed, lost in thoughts about his family and what exactly he was getting himself into. 20 minutes later, they were bounding from roof to roof before spying on the rooftop of the academy. Naruto landed adroitly next to Iruka, eyeing the class almost warily. Had it really been just a few months ago that he had been in the academy? It seemed like a lifetime ago, meeting Anko, Kusa, meeting his new team, and dealing with the Kumo Aiki, Unity, and soon the Chunin exams. It just seemed impossible that all of that could have happened in just a little over 2 months. I promised you guys something special, Iruka was saying to the interested-looking class. Well, not only are we having class outside today, but I've asked someone to speak with. Why? Hey, a voice suddenly shouted, followed by a familiar brown-haired Run jumping to his feet to point at Naruto. How dare you show your face here? Huh? Naruto blinked, looking away from the faces on the mountain to stare at the child. Hoi, aren't you the ninja that is going to defeat you? The boy shouted and then darted forward, a kunai flashing from somewhere, his scarf fluttering behind him. Naruto naturally reacted the only way he could. He promptly brought his foot up and let the kid slam face first into it. Looking at the now dazed boy, he blinked and snapped his fingers in recognition. Hoi, it's Konohamaru. Naruto. Iruka shouted. What? Naruto asked defensively. He's the one that charged me with a weapon. He's lucky I didn't force feed it to him. That's Sandame's grandson. Iruka shouted, looking horrified. I know, Naruto blinked, then looked back down at a recovering Konohamaru. Hoi, didn't I tell you the next time you charged me, I was going to kill you? Konohamaru blinked, then hopped to his feet. Ah, that was just a test. Nisen is my rival, I had to make sure that you were not getting rusty. Naruto blinked. Konohamaru blinked. Go sit your ass down. I will. Konohamaru never finished his sentence since Naruto bashed him on top of his head, which knocked him on his ass. Oh, are you deaf? Naruto. Iruka shouted, but the blonde merely shrugged while Konohamaru rubbed at his head. Breathing heavily, the scared Chunin turned back to the shocked class and continued firmly. I've asked Naruto to talk with you about being a ninja. He's a recent graduate and he's preparing for the Chunin exam. And I'm going to be the next Hokage, Naruto added firmly. What? Konohamaru shouted, jumping to his feet. You can't be the next Hokage. Why not? Because I'm going to be the next Hokage. Idiot. Who'd acknowledge a punk like you? Naruto asked, bashing him on the head again. Oh, Konohamaru shouted, rubbing his head. Well, becoming Hokage isn't that hard. Especially if you take shortcuts, a boy said, sounding smug. Boy, you're an even bigger idiot than Konohamaru, Naruto interrupted, glaring at the boy. Hokage is the name of the greatest ninja in the village. If you just think it's going to be easy, then you'll never be Hokage. There are no shortcuts. There's always shortcut. No, there isn't, Naruto said, clenching his fist. Whoever thinks like that should give up on being a ninja right now. Why? A girl asked anxiously, glancing at the boy who had just been talking. Because, even if being Hokage isn't your dream, being a ninja requires dedication and hard work, Naruto said, his memory flashing to the countless times Anko had broken his arm. You'll get hurt and you'll bleed, but you have to keep going. You'll have to do things that you don't want to, hard things, and if you take a shortcut, then you'll never get anywhere. Naruto-san, the shy girl said, raising her hand yet again, and then, seeing she had his attention, continued with her question. What's the hardest thing you've ever had to do? Naruto paused, then looked all of them over before looking at the roof between his feet. The hardest thing he ever had to do? A flash of a ninja, barely older than himself, dying in a spray of blood filled his mind. I killed someone. At the collective murmurs, he looked up, raising his voice slightly. It's part of being a ninja, Was it hard? Another boy asked, curiosity in his voice. They say the first time is the hardest, but it's not, Naruto said slowly, thinking about his experiences. The first time is easy. It's over before you realize it, since you're not really thinking about it. The hard one is the second time. You think about what you're doing, you know, Naruto-san, another boy asked, looking at the blonde. Doesn't it bother you? Naruto blinked, then frowned slightly. No, it's part of being a ninja. I don't believe you. Talk to me, Naruto said, bristling slightly in anger, after you've killed someone. It's very simple, either you accept that you'll have to kill, or you get killed. But I don't wanna. A girl said, eyes wide. Why should we have to kill each other? Because, Naruto said in annoyance, crossing his arms, if you don't, then who will? There were a lot of things Ino would never understand. For example, why the sky was blue, why clouds looked like marshmallows, why her mother sighed disappointedly every time she talked about a mission instead of cooking, Shino's obsession with bugs, or Naruto's fascination with orange and noodles. Mostly, though, Ino couldn't understand how she got herself into hopeless situations. As an example, there was the current situation of her kenjutsu training. Oh, sure, at first, after Hayate's rather hardcore speech, it hadn't been so bad. For the first 2 days, Ino had found it fun and exciting. She worked on channeling chakra through her practice sword, the 9 basic attacks, drawing, and sheathing the sword quickly, basic footwork, and even target practice. All of that had been fine, perfectly understandable. Even the chakra building and stamina exercises had been no problem. On the 3rd day, they had stepped up the training, putting all of what she had learned together in dozens of sparring matches. By the 4th day, she was exhausted every waking moment and hungry almost all the time. Her hands stung, her legs and arms were sore, and, worst of all, she had yet to see a bath. It was only through sheer determination that she had made it through that day and the next. On the 6th day, she had been introduced to the basics again, but this time blindfolded. She still had bruises from the rocks she was supposed to be blocking. Now, on the 7th day she was once more sparring Hayate thankfully, without a blindfold. Or, more correctly, Ino was trying to hide from the insane man, nursing her injured left shoulder. Apparently, Hayate did not believe in light taps. Or, at least, not what a sane person would consider a light tap. So, Ino dearly wanted to know what in the hell had ever possessed her to put herself in this damn situation. Glancing at the sun, while putting a hand on her shoulder, Ino let out a relieved breath. Just a few more hours, and this part of her training would be over. Chakra building and stamina training were cakewalks when compared to this torture. That was when she felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. It was more instinct than training that she managed a forward roll, hurting her shoulder even more, before regaining her feet while spinning around to see Hayate rebounding from the tree she had just been sitting against. This time, it was her training that allowed her to deflect his spinning slash and the next 2 chopping motions of his sword. Pushing away, Ino grasped her sword with both hands, eyes never leaving the sick-looking man across from her. Moving slowly, almost cat-like, she began to circle him and was disappointed to find that he was mirroring her perfectly. It became a game of waiting, of who would be impatient or confident enough to attack first and possibly end the fight. Hayate moved first, darting forward almost faster than Ino could follow, his sword slashing downward at an angle. Ino managed to bring her sword up and around in a block, forcing the practice swords to swirl around until her sword spun free and she brought it back around in a heavy slash. Hayate, however, caught her sword with his own and held it in check, an impassive look on his face. Disengaging, Ino quickly took 2 steps back, dropping her sword to knock Hayate's follow-up slash aside. Twirling her practice sword, finally feeling confident enough to do so, the kunoichi settled into a ready-to-attack position, weapon held straight up in a double-handed grip, and recentered herself. Ino frowned, studying the man for any openings, only to find none. Damn it, Ino whispered, and then rushed forward. Hayate met her halfway through her rush, their practice swords clashing in whirling slashes, stabs, and lunges. The 2 of them moved in a sort of dance, with Ino attempting to mirror the way that Hayate used his sword. Seeing a sudden opening, Ino lunged, and then, when that was blocked, she spun with the momentum and came around in a low slash at her sensei's ankles, only to find nothing but air. The man attacked from behind, and Ino spun just in time to block 4 rapid-fire attacks, grunting as the 2 blades crossed and each exerted their strength against the others. Better, Hayate said simply, looking tired as ever. Ino merely grunted, then, pushing away, skipped backwards, blocking the 3 blows that followed her retreat. Panting, she shifted her grip on the sword, hands almost raw from the rough surface and the vibrations each blow caused. Glaring at her sensei, Ino was annoyed to find him smiling at her. Before she could even think about attacking, he beat her to the punch. Ino brought up the practice sword just in time to parry Hayate's first slash, then his sudden thrust at Ino's left thigh. Backing away, Ino cursed under her breath, unable to believe his speed. After several more minutes, Ino decided that, all things being equal, it was time to go on the offensive once more. Yelling, Ino feinted and lunged in with a quick 1-2, which, sadly, Hayate parried effortlessly. "You're dropping your right shoulder a bit," Hayate commented, his practice sword blocking a series of slashes aimed at his face and chest. Infuriated, she stepped up her attacks, feinting toward his chest, and then, as he moved to block that, changed her attack so that she was slashing at his neck. There was a loud crack as her blade stopped with a jarring force against his own. Glancing at her blade, Hayate looked back at her, raising an eyebrow, as if mildly impressed. Spinning suddenly, Ino made another lunge at his chest, yelling furiously. For one brief instant, Ino thought she would actually hit him, but then he pivoted on the ball of his foot and spun around so that he was behind her. You're overextending yourself," Hayate said casually, and then, without further ado, pushed her from behind, sending her face first into the dirt. Ino lay there for a moment, almost willing herself to pass out, and then, sighing, climbed to her feet, turning to face him with her sword held tightly. "What the hell is wrong with me? Nothing? I've been training for a week. That's 70 hours of nothing but Kenjutsu." Ino snapped, glaring at him. "I should be better than this." Ino, you are better than you realize. In a little under a week, you've mastered the 9 basic cuts and learned the first form of the basic Fire Country Kenjutsu style," Hayate explained patiently. "You are actually very talented at Kenjutsu. I'd almost say a genius." "I should still be better," Ino fumed, turning her glare to the forest. She wasn't sure where that sentiment came from, but it was inside her, almost shouting it, and Ino knew it to be true. "We have 1 week left," Hayate said, crouching down next to her. "Everything I've taught you so far is the typical Fire Country style. Flips, footwork, and complicated sword patterns. As of now, I will teach you Tsuki-Adori." "Tsuki-Adori?" Ino repeatedly turned to stare at her sensei. "Yes, I created it because of my health. All it requires is control, precision, and timing. There is no wasted movement, no wasted energy, no complicated footwork," Hayate said with a slight nod. "It grants almost total protection and allows you to attack at the most opportune moment. Nobody else has even been able to master a single dance, but I think you can." "You do?" Ino blinked then frowned slightly. "A dance? Like, what good are dances?" "Ninjutsu involving the sword," Hayate said, standing up once more. "Hidden techniques that nobody else knows. There's only 10 of them. And you think I can learn them?" "Yes, if you want to truly learn Tsuki-Adori," Hayate said with a nod. "So, what do these dances look like?" In response, Hayate turned, then, in one fluid motion, lifted his sword, twisted it around, and dropped to one knee, driving the tip of the sword into the ground. "Dance of the Crashing Dragon." Ino felt the earth rumble under her slightly, then watched in amazement as the ground between Hayate and the post exploded. Shielding her face, Ino watched, as best she could, as the man stood upright once more and pulled his sword free from the earth. It was amazing, it was mind-blowing, it was beyond anything Ino had ever seen. She had to learn how to do that. When the dust finally settled, Hayate turned to stare at her, his face serious. That dance is considered C rank and is a good distraction or interruption technique. You start by gathering your chakra into the blade of your sword, and then you drive it into the ground and release it. Seems easy enough, Ino couldn't help but remark before seeing the way he stared at her. How it seems and how it is are 2 different things, Hayate said before coughing into his hand for several minutes. When he finally stopped, he looked up at her, his face almost a grimace. "Hayate-sensei, are you?" Ino started to ask, moving toward him, only to stop short when he interrupted her. "I'm fine," the man said, coughing once more into his cupped hand. "I've been sick for a long time, Ino. This is nothing. Let's begin." Ino nodded reluctantly, eyeing the man once more, and set to work. Still, she had a leaden feeling in her stomach that something was wrong with the whole situation. Though nobody thought about it, Mitarashi Anko was an orphan. Even she rarely, if ever, thought about that fact, since she was very much a now person. The fact remained that Anko had grown up without a family for a good portion of her life until Orochimaru had taken her under his guidance. That was why she was traveling from roof to roof, searching from the Hokage mountain to that ramen stand he loved so much, and hunted through the training fields. No orphan could be told anything about his or her family and not react, though the reaction itself would vary. For Anko, after learning why her family had abandoned her, she had devoted herself completely to Orochimaru. Naruto would react differently, but still she had to find and help him. Despite what the Hokage thought, he was more important to her than anything had been in a long time. So she was not about to let him freak out and try to handle this on his own. Entering training area 25, she paused at the rapid-fire sound of impact against nearly petrified wooden training posts. Unsurprised that he would be pouring himself into, that she leaned against a tree, arms crossed watching him, as he muttered under his breath and tore into the post for all he was worth. He was moving with a great deal more grace than he had so long ago, and Anko was almost startled at the changes she was noticing. When he finally came to a stop, he was panting, and she grinned slightly. "So, feel better now?" Naruto turned eyes wide, and then he frowned. "Go away, why?" Anko asked, arching an eyebrow. "I like watching exercises in futility." "Anko," Naruto said warningly. "That's my name," Anko said with a shrug. "So, do you feel better now, or what?" "It's none of your business," Naruto snapped. "Heh, see, this is the thing. I think you're wrapped up in your own little tragic play, like you're the only one that's got a reason to be prissy or angry." Naruto glared at her silently and then looked away, fists clenching and unclenching. "I just figured that it wouldn't hurt so much if you were alone? That you wouldn't have to think about it if you trained until you passed out?" Anko finished for him, crossing her own arms. "That will never happen." "But it hurts," Naruto said in a low voice, turning to look at her. "Didn't they love me? Or want me? Maybe they didn't die, maybe they just abandoned me? If they did die, why or how could they just leave me? I pretend it doesn't hurt, but it's like." "Give me your arm," Anko said abruptly, pulling a kunai from inside her jacket. Seeing his hesitation, she fixed him with a glare. "Come on, just give me the damn arm." Hesitating slightly, because Anko plus kunai plus his arm did nothing good, he offered it up and then watched curiously as she grabbed his hand while shoving the sleeve up to expose his forearm. He opened his mouth to say something when she looked up at him in a way that made him pause in fascination. "What I'm going to do will hurt like a motherfucker," Anko explained. "You'll want to yank your arm away, and you will probably cry, but this helped me not too long ago. So, just sit still, suck it up, and let's see how much of a Hokage you really are." Naruto blinked, then, with a nod, looked at his arm. He tensed when the cold tip touched his flesh, then winced as it slowly pierced his skin. He had to bite his lip, tried hard not to cry, and to keep from looking away as the kunai slowly cut line after line into his arm. Anko was intent, and she moved with a careful precision that was both frightening and reassuring. It seemed to go on for hours, him trying hard not to cry and failing, her slicing his arm and not caring. Then, finally, she was finished. The metal was removed, and he pulled his arm in to cradle it against his jacket, ignoring the blood that was leaking all over him. "Here," Anko said, and he looked up to see her offering a rag of some type. Grasping it, he pressed it against his arm and then looked up at her once more, watching as she produced a bottle of sake and watched him. "You know, I screamed my head off when I did that. Might have been because I was doing it myself and had to keep stopping because of the pain." Naruto only started and then, in a sort of horrible fascination, looked at his arm and the rag covering it. He had watched, sure, but the pain had made him unable to figure out what she was carving into his flesh. Hesitantly, he moved the rag, smearing the blood, and studied what she had carved into his flesh. It took him a moment to fully register the familiarly stylized Konoha leaf symbol and another to wonder at how it seemed to be healing already. Looking up, he saw her shaking back one of her sleeves to reveal an arm sporting her own Konoha leaf. "It makes no sense, does it? Why did I carve that into your arm?" "My arm?" Anko said, fixing him with her stare while setting her sake down in front of him. "It's a symbol, like our forehead protectors. It reminds us of everything we've lost, everything we have, and our dreams. For us, this village is pretty much all we have. Never forget or let the bastards win. Never give up," Naruto said firmly. "I'm going to be Hokage. I will never stop. I know, Anko said, smirking. Now, I think it's high time you got drunk. Huh, Naruto blinked. But I'm underage. That only matters if you're a villager, Anko countered, her smirk becoming sadistically evil. You're a ninja. But sake doesn't taste good, Naruto countered. Then do this, Anko said, picking the bottle up before she pinched her nose and tossed her head back, chugging for a moment before handing it to him. Naruto blinked, sniffed the bottle, and then, seeing her attention on him, he pinched his nose and tossed his head back, chugging, as she had. He was surprised that it was going so fast that he couldn't even taste it, but he could definitely feel the warmth already finishing the bottle. He stared at her, his grin slightly lopsided. Anko chuckled and produced another bottle. Boy, where do you keep those? Oh, Anko said, uncorking it, a coy smile on her face, we girls have all sorts of hiding places. Naruto had the grace to blush, for once getting exactly what she meant. Yui Kurenai was fighting her nerves. After all, this would be her first team to enter the Chunin exams. True, they still had a week left, but she was still nervous. Her team was not exactly happy with her new training regimen either. Kiba had been skipping a lot, and Sakura trained only because Sasuke deemed it worthwhile to show up. Sasuke was the only one that was willing to train, but then again, he was an Uchiha, and they were predisposed toward combat. Shaking it all off, Kurenai at least took comfort in the fact that she had managed to pry Naruto from Anko's sadistic and corrupting clutches. Hayate was a good man, upstanding and well-grounded, a very good ninja. Naruto would now at least have a chance at a normal no genin was normal really childhood. Still, it was the least she could do for her village and for an innocent child. Then, all of her pride and righteous satisfaction was destroyed in one fell swoop as she entered the training area to find Anko passed out on the ground, with Naruto's head resting on her chest, amid countless empty sake bottles. Kiba was the first of her team to arrive, for once, and he paused beside her, his tone awed as he took in the scene. I have never wanted to be Naruto so badly. He paused as Akamaru barked, then nodded slightly in agreement with the white small dog perched on his head. Then again. All this Kurenai managed weakly, unable to believe what she was seeing. Sakura and Sasuke were the next to arrive, both freezing in their tracks. He's underage, and her skirt is too short, Sakura railed, in a surprisingly accurate depiction of a younger Kurenai's likely reaction. Sasuke, on the other hand, took in the entire scene, then snorted. They deserve each other. With that, Naruto promptly rolled over and buried his face into Anko's chest with a small snore, the empty sake bottle he had been holding falling to the ground. Slipping into the semi-dark building of Leaf Central, Anko grimaced at the knowledge of what such an early morning summons could mean. Walking past the empty desks and rooms, she made her way to the stairs that would eventually take her to the Hokage's office. Footsteps echoing eerily, as she climbed, Anko almost felt as if she was entering Orochimaru's lair once more. She shivered at the memory. In all honesty, this was the last place she wanted to be, mainly because she could still see the disappointment that had been clearly etched in Sandame's face upon her return from Fushimi. He hadn't shouted or ranted, those she could have handled. Instead, he had spoken in an almost whisper, firm but soft. He was polite, but he hid none of his disappointment. He had somehow managed to make her feel guilty about her decision in taking Naruto. It made her feel as if this was less about her judgment and more about her betraying his trust. Anko hated that, despite how she should feel after his recent decisions, she felt guilty about betraying his trust. So she had thrown herself into training Naruto, pushing him to refine everything he had learned. Had worked him almost to the breaking point in an effort to ensure that the Hokage would see it. See how guilty she felt, how much she wanted to do exactly what he wanted. How much Anko actually cared about Naruto when she cared about nothing else. Shaking it all off, she quietly exited the stairway and then, unconsciously greeting the hidden Anbu, strode down the hallway to the door that was looming larger and larger. Pausing, she took a moment to gather herself and then threw the door open, entering with her usual gusto. Hey you old man, you wanted to see me? Anko-san, the Hokage said, looking up from a scroll on his desk, his face neutral. Good morning. Morning, Anko returned, hiding her disappointment at his lack of usual warmth. Then she noticed Kakashi and Hayate and blinked in surprise. Huh, what are you two doing here? Nothing important, Kakashi said immediately, hastily shoving his recently recovered book into his pocket. Anko said, smirking slightly before looking at the sick-looking man seated before the Hokage's desk. She knew Hayate, they had worked together for a while, but he had never been one of her favorite people. Still, she had some respect for him, so instead of making a wisecrack about drugs, she arched an eyebrow, wondering silently at the parlor of his skin. Hayate in turn offered her a weak smile before coughing into a red-stained rag, which set off an alarm bell in her head. Anko-san, the Sandame finally continued, his tone soft but firm. The reason I ask you to come in is because Hayate-san needs to take several days off from active duty. This would leave his team without a sensei, and this close to the exams I couldn't assign another person. Anko resisted the urge to glance yet again at the sick man in question, already knowing the obvious from the few clues she had. There was no other explanation, and it was all because he had slipped up and allowed a spider to bite him and worsen his condition. I see, Anko said just as seriously, crossing her arms and lowering her chin. What about the second exam? I know you wanted me to proctor it. Kakashi-san said that he would do that, Sandame said, lacing his fingers together while giving her a piercing look. I need you to take responsibility for Team Hayate and Uzumaki Naruto, at least for the duration of this exam. Anko let out a small breath, whether this was a chance from the heavens or merely a coincidence, it didn't matter. The Hokage was offering her a chance to regain his trust, and it was a chance to help Naruto prove himself to everyone. So of course she would accept this, but she also understood one other thing. They could not be Team Hayate and Naruto, there had to be one team. Just one. A single unit. You won't have to do much, just make sure to enter them into the Chunin exam today at noon. After that, just make sure they show up in 2 days and be there for the completion of the second exam. Sandame was saying, his voice never changing. I'll do it, Anko said evenly, trying to figure out a way to forge the 3 genin into a true team within 3 days. However, to do that, she needed to know the other 2 slightly better, no point in killing them if they had to be around to work with Naruto later. That's it then, both of you are dismissed. Sandame said politely, then added, as Anko turned to head for the door. Thank you, Anko. Don't worry, Anko responded casually with a flick of her wrist. For the chance to torture a princess, I'd do almost anything. Closing the door behind her, she was relieved to hear the amused chuckle from the Sandame. Free of the office now, and staring at an uncomfortable-looking Hayate, she turned back to the more immediate concern of forging a team out of those 3. I need to know a few things. What exactly do you need to know? Hayate asked, coughing into the rag yet again, as he led the way back toward the stairs. How big you are, Anko said sarcastically before snorting. Your team, what else? I need to know something about them, if I'm gonna be their sensei. Why? Hayate immediately asked, his tone guarded. The truth? Anko asked, shooting him an exasperated look. You're dying. The Hokage knows, Kakashi knows. Probably everyone Jonin or above. So obviously this isn't temporary, so I need to know what to do with those little shits since I'm gonna be responsible now. Hayate paused, staring at her, rather shrewdly, before he coughed. Abiram Shino is capable, he creates plans within plans, and he seems to have almost no emotions. He's brutal, efficient, and at times utterly frightening. He is, however, a bit too dependent on his bugs, even for his family. Anko managed to fall into step behind the man as they descended the stairs. No personality, huh? None. Hayate said in agreement before coughing once more. Yakamana Ino, on the other hand, appears to be nothing but emotions. Competitive, temperamental, and comes across as a complete ditz. Gee, color me impressed. She also has more talent at Kenjutsu than anyone I've ever known. Hayate explained in response, his tone almost proud. I trained her for the last 2 weeks in nothing but Kenjutsu. Other people wouldn't have been able to pick it up. Ino grasped everything I taught her easily. Impressive, Anko drew, as they finally left the stairs and started for the front doors. Anything else? She has this odd tendency to notice things that others overlook. I think it comes from her use of the family jutsu, even if she doesn't use them that often. Well, sounds like the makings of a decent team, Anko said in amusement as they finally left the Hokage Tower and stepped out into the streets. Anko-senpai, Hayate said, coughing once more. What exactly are you thinking about doing to them? I'm going to forge them into the most dangerous team possible. Anko said blandly, raising an eyebrow. You only have 3 days, Hayate responded tiredly. How exactly are you going to manage that? Akigahara. Anko said simply, then seeing the surprise on his face, cackled before walking off down the street. Yawning, Naruto's eyes fluttered open wearily, only to squint as the annoying buzzing of his alarm clock reached him. Sitting up, he yawned while knocking his sleeping cap off. Looking around clearly, he sighed, tossing his covers aside before climbing to his feet. As per his newfound habit, Anko insisted on it. He grabbed the few kunai near his bed and fired them off blindly at the targets she had affixed to his far wall. He missed each one. Naruto, however, didn't care. He was too busy lamenting his lack of sleep, which had been sadly short supply ever since returning from Fushimi. Apparently, Anko had decided, for some unknown reason, to revamp her already insane training practices. The only bright side was that she had adjusted the training time so that the sun was actually up when they started training. Stumbling his way through the untidy apartment, he managed to clear his room, the hallway, and enter the bathroom with little to no fuss. Shedding his sleep shirt and pants, he turned on the shower, which sputtered to life, and then climbed in. Swaying on his feet, he went through the motions of showering. This served to edge his mind toward consciousness, which sadly prompted his mind onto the same touchy subject he had been dealing with since the news of his bloodline. His family, the ones he pretended not to miss, the ones that he hated and wanted so badly. Were they ashamed of him, or hated him, or was something just wrong with him? Why didn't they want him? They were questions that he had asked thousands of times, and he still had no answers. All he knew was that he felt hurt, betrayed, and angry, with nothing to rage against. Shaking it all off and finishing his shower, he tried to finish waking up, but failed for the most part. Searching absently for a towel, he frowned, dimly aware that he had none on hand, which meant he would just have to drip dry. Sourly, he stumbled out of the bathroom and out to the kitchen, where he gathered his customary breakfast of ramen and milk before plopping down on a chair. Eating in silence, he paused suddenly, looking around as if remembering something he had forgotten. It was important, but since he couldn't think of anything, he turned his attention back to his meal. A few minutes later, he paused yet again, looking around, sure that he was forgetting something important. Turning back to his meal, he lifted a warm noodle to his mouth and froze, the noodles in his stomach turning to lead. Anko had threatened him with genjutsu training, or more accurately, she had threatened to cast a genjutsu and fill his apartment with something unpleasant. Lowering his noodles, he looked up, blue eyes darting left and then right, like a prey catching the scent of an approaching predator. Everything seemed normal, but Naruto was suddenly very uneasy about his nudity. Covering his crotch, he quickly stood and raced back into his bedroom to frantically cover himself, nearly hurting a very important part of his anatomy. Breathing easier, he walked back out into his apartment and found Anko sitting on his couch, holding a handful of pictures in her hands. Naruto felt his neck hairs stand on end. "Anko. Heh, you sensed me, huh?" Anko said absently, grinning evilly at the pictures. "Not quite a dispel, but that's still an improvement." "Are those pictures?" "Well, of course, you're quite photogenic," Naruto, Anko said, glancing at him, a suggestive grin on her lips as she stood. Naruto blinked, his cheeks coloring at the realization. "Anyway, I figure this hammers home the point that if you can't dispel or detect genjutsu, then you're at an attacker's mercy," Anko said, gesturing with the pictures, revealing for a moment a stark naked Naruto. "I guess I should deliver these around the village. Maybe that Sakura girl would like to see a Muruu. How about Ino?" Naruto paled and then narrowed his eyes. "Hoi. Give them to me." "No, don't think so," Anko chirped happily. "You want 'em, you'll have to come and take 'em." "Fine," Naruto roared and darted forward, striking nothing but empty air as Anko dodged and moved toward the open balcony window. Naruto was hot on her heels. Ino was not an early riser. As a matter of fact, she was more of a mid-afternoon riser, and anytime she was forced out of her warm bed and out into the world at the crack of dawn made her irritable. Hayate had known this, but had not really cared too much. Still, he respected her enough to keep team training until later in the afternoon, for which Ino had kept from murdering him. Their new, mysterious sensei, however, didn't seem to have any interest in living. Ino could still remember her mother's almost apologetic smile this morning, having roused her out of bed. Ino had been understandably irate about this. After all, she had only been home one day from her genjutsu training. Yet her mom had explained that her new sensei wanted her up and ready to go in the usual training area by sunrise. Muttering phrases that her mom conveniently chose to not hear, Ino had gotten ready, grabbed the ninja 2 Hayate had loaned her, and then stormed off. She encountered Shino shortly after this, and despite her anger and worry about Hayate, they had walked in companionable silence to the training area. Where they waited. They had both watched the sky brighten, the sun rise, and listened as both of their stomachs rumbled in hunger. Irritable, Ino had performed the kenjutsu form that Hayate had taught her, while Shino began talking with his bugs. At almost noon she had stopped and sat under a tree, arms crossed, glaring at the forest, determined to kill their sensei as soon as they arrived. "I'm getting tired of this waiting. I'd like someone to tell us what the hell is going on." Ino finally snapped, frustrated beyond belief. "I am sure the answer will come soon," Shino said in his persistently calm manner. Ino felt her eye twitch slightly, a sure sign of a building explosion. She mastered herself, however. It was almost pointless to berate the boy since he could say nothing else. Exasperated, she looked at the sky, catching the edge of the sun as it danced through the foliage. Something about that made her blink in realization and look around. Where was Naruto? He should have been there, after all he was part of their team, and Hayate had never mentioned that changing. Thinking about the other blonde, Ino wasn't sure whether to be relieved he wasn't around or worried. "Ino-san, I have been meaning to discuss something with you." Snapping out of her thoughts, she focused on Shino, wondering what he was about to say. He seemed to be considering his next words, at least until the sound of a small explosion echoed through the air. Followed by a smug female voice. "Come on, can't you move any faster? Bitch. Hold still." Another, even louder, male voice called back. Ino blinked and got to her feet, looking in the direction the voices had come from. While she couldn't be sure, Ino felt confident that the second one belonged to Naruto. This was proven a minute later as a woman, dressed in almost nothing but fishnetting and a trench coat, leaped into the training area. Followed shortly after Naruto, who had a kunai in hand and murder in his eyes. The blonde in question rebounded from his heavy landing and pushed off extremely quickly while thrusting his kunai for the now grinning woman's face. Ino blinked, shocked, and it was over just like that. Suddenly Naruto was on the ground, the woman's foot stomping into his chest while she crossed her arms. "PFFH, you must be getting tired, you brat. Normally I'd have to kill 4 or 5 clones before this. You stupid psychotic bit guumph," Naruto said, choking off as the foot stomped on his chest yet again. "Hey," Ino said, startled, reaching for her ninja-2. The woman turned her attention to the girl, and Ino started to unsheath her sword, only to freeze halfway through for no apparent reason. The woman in question, however, grinned brighter than ever, which somehow made her even more scary. "Careful, princess, you could hurt yourself with that." Ino tried to say something, but found her mouth clamped shut without any apparent means, which frightened her. "Relax, that's just a paralyzing jutsu. It'll wear off in a few minutes," the woman explained, stepping off of Naruto to stretch. "I take it, you're the Yamanaka girl," which means at this the woman turned her attention to a still calm Shino. "That little bugger is Abram Shino. Oi. What the hell is wrong with you?" Naruto shouted, hopping to his feet, his face angry. The woman absently smacked him upside his head, her grin never fading, as she looked back at Ino. "In case you're wondering, I'm Matrashi Anko, your new sensei." Ino couldn't help but make an incredulous noise at that announcement, which seemed to irritate Anko, who threw a kunai which seemed to come from nowhere within inches of Ino's ear. "I have a low tolerance to bullshit, and I have no problem killing either of you. I told you she was a psycho," Naruto mumbled, crossing his arms and glaring at Anko. The room was simple, a stone floor with various items leaning against the walls and white tapestries hanging down at intervals. A red carpet, tripped in white, ran the full length of the floor from the entrance to the raised section, where a high-backed seat and curved desk rested. It was simple, and yet at the same time it was intimidating. It was a formal meeting hall, used only on the rare occasion of a truly important event. The naming of a Hokage, a private marriage between 2 high-ranking ninja, peace treaties, declarations of war. The Sandaime, who was sitting behind the desk smoking his pipe while pretending to be the iron foundation that the village needed, had used this hall for all of those things. He had named the Yondaime Hokage here, he had seen the marriage of several powerful ninja, signed several peace treaties and declarations of wars. So much time, he mused before shaking all of that off and focusing on the selected ninja before him. These 20 were the chosen senseis of the current group of rookie genin. Each were serious, except for one who was busy eating dango and trying to flirt with the Anbu commander. The Sandaime felt a twinge of various emotions seeing her, but kept those carefully in check. It should be obvious why you've all been assembled, the Hokage finally said, staring out at them closely, his memory flashing back to when most of them were genin themselves. Taking a puff, he blew a smoke ring, dispelling the memories. Of course, Hokage-sama, Kurenai said respectfully, almost brimming with energy and pride. The Sandaime offered her an indulgent smile, knowing that she was anxious to prove her worth as a sensei. So which of the newly graduated genin are ready? He was sorely disappointed when only two people stepped forward, one an attractive female with red eyes, the other wearing a brown trench coat and eating dango. Well? Kurenai, Anko, are there any genin that you'd recommend? Studying them, the old man took a puff on his pipe before sighing. Please remember that it's recommended that they have at least 8 missions. Hokage-sama, one question. Kurenai said respectfully, keeping from glancing at the woman beside her. Mitarashi Anko is only the sensei for Uzumaki Naruto, who I doubt could handle this exam. Excuse me? Anko interrupted, staring at Kurenai. You don't think Naruto couldn't handle this stupid test? Ah, that's right. I can see how someone with your record might find it difficult, Ikki Kauhai. What was that? Kurenai said slowly, a killer intent beginning to radiate off her. Nothing, Anko smirked, raising an eyebrow. Just pointing out that for someone that suffered setbacks, the Chunin exams could be viewed as dangerous. Are you trying to pick a fight? Kurenai snapped, glaring at the older woman. Anko, however, looked away, addressing the Hokage.my soldier has completed a B-ranked and an A-ranked mission. Team Hayate has managed at least one successful B-rank mission. Shooting Kurenai a look, she snorted. These are 3 genin that have been trained by a former Anbu captain, as well as a special Jonin, and not some wannabe Jnin. My team has handled an A-ranked mission and several C-ranked missions. Kurenai shouted before stepping up to point at Anko. Hokage-sama, if you let this woman's soldier and that team compete, then what message are you sending? Besides, don't you think she might be just trying to remove them? We all remember her genin test and who her sense. Enough. The Hokage suddenly said, his tone radiating authority. You are both grown women and genin. Any problems that you two have should not interfere or cloud your judgment. Am I clear? As crystal. Anko said, her eyes almost narrowing. When Kurenai nodded, albeit reluctantly, Sandaime took a puff on his pipe, attempting to ease his heart back to normal. He sensed Kakashi's focus shifting to him, and he made it a point of pretending to be fine. Starting with Kurenai-san then. The woman in question lifted her fingers into the proper position and almost spat out the names hatefully while glaring at Anko, who was happily munching her dango once more. The Kurenai lead Team 7, Uchiha Sasuke, Inuzuka Kiba, and Haruno Sakura under the name of Yuhi Kurenai. I nominate them to take the Chunin selection exam. Anko-san? Yay, Anko. Team 9 formerly Hayate's Naruto, Ino, Shino, they can all take the exam. Anko said, waving a hand before putting her dango up and stretching. Are we done now? I think this should be done properly, Sandaime said, locking his eyes with Anko. The woman stared back, her face carefree, as always, but he saw her uneasiness. Then smiling sweetly, she put her hand into the proper position. Sure, whatever. The Anko-led, formerly Hayate-led, Team 9, Uzumaki Naruto, Aburam Shino, and Yamanaka Ino under the name Mitarashi Anko, the same as to my right. Nodding, the Hokage looked at the other gathered Junins, tone serious. Anyone else? No? Very well, we are done for now. Dismissed. They all did just that, with Anko trailing behind, but eventually they were alone, and the Sandaime felt himself slump into his seat slightly. Kakashi was there almost instantly, placing a cup on the desk before him. Hokage-sama, you can't keep this up much longer. Chuckling, the Hokage sipped at the herbal drink, appreciating the medicine, as always. Setting it down, he looked up at the masked man, radiating confidence that only he could manage. Ah, Kakashi-kun, I will be fine. Do we have any words for Jiraiya? Well, we've whispered in the right places that it's urgent that you see him about the Yondaime's legacy, Kakashi said, shaking his head. As for words, nothing yet, but knowing him, he'll probably just turn up. Yes, he was always surprised, Sandaime agreed before sighing heavily. As if by unspoken command, the Anbu commander left, and the Sandaime closed his eyes, wondering just how much longer he could keep going. The only answer he could find was long enough. Geez, why do you think she kidnapped this Konohamaru kid? Ino muttered as they moved among the trees. Boy, cause like she said, she was drunk. Naruto responded irritably, keeping pace beside her. Shino fought the grimace as he sensed yet another argument building between the two. His head was already throbbing from the migraine he was developing from their arguments, which were getting worse every time. If Ino suggested one place, Naruto would argue and had to be dragged kicking to check it out. If Naruto suggested something, Ino would do the exact same thing. It was like the last mission they had been on together, only worse. No, I mean why, Ino said in annoyance. He's the Hokage's grandson, only an insane person would actually kidnap him cause they were drunk. At what point did she seem sane to you? Naruto muttered. She was just trying to scare us, Ino snapped. Shino almost, but not quite whimpered as his headache increased in strength. At least, however, they sounded more like a married couple now than the cats and dogs from earlier. We cannot risk it, Ino-san. My family says that she came here not too long ago. Boy, I still don't get how you can tell that sort of thing. Naruto said, sounding thoroughly confused. My bugs sustain themselves on chakra, Shino explained, glancing at the blonde behind him. Thus they can distinguish between people's chakra. Since she did use chakra, my bugs were exposed to it and they learned that scent. Ook, Naruto said slowly, clearly not understanding. So they're following Anko's chakra? Correct, Shino said, looking forward once more. However, the scent is becoming weaker due to how much time has passed since she traveled this way. Then why are we going so slow? Naruto said in frustration, darting forward. Hey. Naruto, get your ass back here. Ino shouted angrily. Let him go, Shino said calmly, resigned to the fact that they would never be a true team. According to my family, he's going in the correct direction. That blonde jackass, Ino grumbled in response. 10 minutes later they reached the edge of the forest they had been traveling through, revealing Naruto, who was glaring at Anko, who was munching dangos happily. Landing adroitly, followed by Ino, Shino also noted a bound, an unconscious child at her feet being used as a footstool. Turning away from that, he glanced at the barbed wire fence behind the woman. It seemed rather ominous actually. Why was there a fence here separating two sections of forest? About time, Anko said, finishing off her dango. Yeesh, thought you'd get here a couple hours ago. Yeah, Naruto said in response. Hoi, so what now? Anko flashed them a smile before climbing to her feet while holding a length of rope which was attached to the bundle at her feet. Well, I am taking this run home, then getting some sake. You guys are going in there to find your applications for the Chunin exam in 3 days. Really? Naruto said excitedly. Ino made an uneasy noise while Shino arched an eyebrow, which was more due to the way Naruto shifted from petulant to excited. Only early he had been lamenting and berating Anko, and now he looked as if he was about to hug the woman. It was an odd dynamic that worried him for some reason. Yeah, like hey, thought you're ready. Anko said, as if in exasperation. All you have to do now is decide whether to take the exam or not. If you do, fill the applications out and hand them in at room 301 at 4 p.m. the day after tomorrow. Yes. One step closer to Hokage. So, where exactly did you put them? Ino asked, sounding annoyed and not bothering to hide it. You'll have to work that out for yourselves, Anko said, simply shooting her a sharp look. So you guys have a good day. Turning, the woman started to walk away, dragging a squirming Konohamaru behind her before she paused and looked back over her shoulder at Ino. Oh, and princess, try not to get yourself killed. Shino winced, watching the woman casually continue on her way, leaving a now fuming Ino behind. Ino felt a hint of anxiety forming in her chest, staring at that fence, topped with barbed wire, and beyond that to the forbidding trees. Maybe she was merely projecting her own feelings, but it definitely felt malevolent. Shifting her attention to Naruto, she was relieved to see what appeared to be uncertainty on his face. So, what do you think? Ino finally asked, glancing at Shino and then back to the forest. It would appear we have no choice, Shino said calmly. Boy, it's just some scary woods, Naruto said boisterously, moving toward the fence slightly. Idiot, look at those signs, Ino snapped, gesturing at the battered and weather-worn signs before them. This place is dangerous. Bah, it's just a mind game. Naruto said in dismissal, jumping to the top of the fence, careful to not touch the barbed wire. Ino shot Shino an exasperated look, only to sigh as Shino followed the blonde's lead. Shaking her head, knowing this would not lead to anything worthwhile, followed both boys. Landing carefully, performing a balancing act to keep from getting her feet sliced up from the barbed wire. Annoyed, she shifted her attention away from the immediate area to a splotch of red and an outcropping of some sort. "Oi, doesn't look so bad," Naruto said, nodding in her peripheral vision. "I don't think," Ino started to say, only to blink in surprise as he jumped off the fence and fell through a hidden pit. Naruto. Jumping down alongside Shino, they both peered into the hole to find Naruto spread eagle, holding himself a hairspray over several sharpened bamboo poles. "Kami," Ino said, kneeling beside the hole. "Are you okay, Naruto?" "Gee, let me think," Naruto shouted back sarcastically. "I'm in a hole with sharp pointy objects pointed at me." "Yeah, I'm just great, Ino." "Well, I was just asking," Ino shouted back before looking at Shino. "So, how should we get him out?" Shino, however, was denied his chance to respond when Naruto suddenly exploded from the pit and landed in a crouch. "Oi, when I get my hands on that psychotic bitch, I'm going to shove those damn dango sticks up her ass." Ino blinked, staring at him in surprise. The way he talked about so casually assaulting his own sensei frightened her. Then again, the way Anko had treated him, she could understand it, but it was still disturbing. Shaking it off, she turned her mind back to the more serious problem. "So where do you think she put those applications?" "Most likely in the center," Shino answered stoically, as ever. "If we go there, we may find what we are looking for. So we just go in a straight line," Naruto said decisively, climbing to his feet while stretching. "Weren't you paying attention?" Ino suddenly demanded, infuriated by what he was saying. "I doubt that we can just, walk through this. This place is dangerous, we could get ourselves killed." "Oi, we gotta get those applications," Naruto retorted, rounding on her. "Going straight is the best answer. That ranks right up there with counting to 3 as a plan." Ino snapped in frustration. "Do you have a better idea?" Ino narrowed her gaze on him, but remained silent. "Aha. So we go straight," Naruto exclaimed, setting off fearlessly. "He does have a point," Shino said calmly, as well. "The quickest path is a straight line." "I'm sure," Ino said, climbing to her feet to trudge after Shino and Naruto. Not that she didn't trust the blonde somewhat, but there was no telling what that crazy woman had done. Hell, from the way Anko had treated them, so far Ino wouldn't have been surprised if she was seriously trying to kill them. Fuming and worrying over the various problems they were now facing, Ino almost didn't feel it, the brush of strong yet giving thread. Yet she did feel it, and she froze, her memory replaying a moment not so long ago when she had snapped something similar. Then she heard it, the vague sound of another set of wires being snapped. Looking up, she found Naruto frozen as well, the obvious source of the now compounded blunder. Her first instinct was to shout at him, but her second instinct, which came from the fact that she could already hear the rushing weapons, was to move. Then she was left in stunned amazement as Naruto shoved Shino behind him, apparently squaring up to the incoming hail of weapons. "Fton, de Tapa." There was a soft roar, which quickly grew in strength until suddenly everything in Naruto's path bent and swayed as if hit by a wind from a tornado. Branches snapped off, there was the deep crack of trees that would not bend, and most notable was the hail of kunai which twisted and turned away to embed themselves in all sorts of locations. The mysterious storm persisted for another minute and then quickly died, the accompanying noise dying to a soft murmur. Relaxing her muscles for the moment, Ino sighed in relief, then glared at Naruto. "Let's go straight, you said. Boy, you're the one that set off that first trap." Naruto snapped, rounding on her. "Only because I was distracted thinking about your sensei," Ino shouted angrily. "Whose fault is that?" "Yours." "Oh yeah? Yeah. Fine. If you don't want me here, I'm leaving," Naruto shouted and then stormed off. "Fine, go," Ino shouted, waving her hands after him before turning to storm off in the opposite direction. "That stupid Naruto grumbled, leaping from branch to branch, trying desperately to find a suitable what Ino exactly was. All he really knew was that she was stupid and got his last nerve. Angry and fuming, he began to grin manically, picturing Ino suffering some of the tortures that Anko had first threatened him with. Would serve her right, Naruto agreed, nodding smugly. Hearing the sound of yet another tripwire being snapped, he dodged the incoming hail by instinct, then hearing the hiss of an exploding note, scrambled onward, snapping another 2 wires and hastily dodging the hail from the weapons. Damn it. Landing heavily with a stumble, he looked behind him at the ruined path, scratching at the back of his head. Maybe this place is a little dangerous." Naruto nodded then snorted, turning to walk on. Still not any reason to be afraid though. Smug that he wouldn't fall for any more traps, he boldly began to whistle. At least until the world flashed and turned upside down. Wah! Naruto managed, as he suddenly found himself frantically clawing at the ground to keep from falling, with his hair on end, while weapons fell into the sky. He thought briefly of clutching at the escaping weapons, but didn't dare for fear of falling. Below him the darkening sky stretched onwards, and he knew that, if he tried to move, he would fall away from the earth completely. He could already feel a headache forming from all of the blood rushing to his head, which even Naruto knew was not a good thing. Frantic now, he began trying to focus on something, anything, that would allow him to handle this situation. Sadly, though not surprisingly, Anko had never prepared him for this situation. "Okay," he said through a forced calm, while keeping his eyes squeezed shut, "I'm upside down, so obviously this is like tree walking, nodding." He molded the chakra to his feet and carefully climbed back to his feet, relieved to find that it was working. Opening his eyes tentatively, he looked at his feet glued to the earth and then let out a breath, even as his ears began to pound from the blood racing to his head. So now the blonde paused and considered, feeling odd, as if something about this situation was even more off than the sheer face that up was down and down was up. Where had he felt this before? Then slowly, through the headache of having his blood rush to his head, he realized this was what it had felt like when Anko had put him in a genjutsu that morning. Which, well, it didn't help him any really. After all, he couldn't dispel them, so it didn't do him too good to know it was a genjutsu. Maybe storming off on his own hadn't been such a good idea after all. Not that it was doing him much good to just stand there and think about that sort of thing, but it was getting difficult to think with the blood rushing to his head. Okay, so, I'm supposed to try and stop my chakra and disrupt it, only I'm not sure how to do that. Thinking he could see no way out of this, damn it, if he could just disrupt his chakra. Well, maybe if someone else was around they could do it for him, but there wasn't anybody around. Then realization hit him, his cage bunshin. They were people, sorta, and they could use chakra. If he made one and had it mold its chakra into his? Would that work? Well, he wouldn't know until he tried. Molding his chakra, he concentrated, producing one, which promptly scrambled to hold onto the earth. Boy, it's just an illusion now, stand up and try to mold your chakra into me? The clone blinked then did ask, which sadly didn't seem to work. Then in another flash the world was right side up and vertigo seized the blonde and he toppled to his hands and knees, taking several deep breaths. Recovered, he shakily climbed back to his feet and looked around for the source of the genjutsu. Spotting the seal, he cursed, nearly slapping his forehead at the obviousness of it. He did take some pride in the fact that he had figured out how to handle genjutsu, but still he wouldn't have fallen for it in the first place if Shino or Ino had been around. Frowning, he looked at his idle clone, as if holding a private debate, which in a way he was. The simple fact was that he needed his team. If he wasn't careful, we would end up dead, and they were probably already facing that situation. Oi, you go on ahead and set off traps etc. so I have some idea of what to expect, Naruto finally said, turning as he took off. Grumbling, the real Naruto set off once more at a brisk pace, retracing his steps, hoping that he could come across his team. Well, probably best to create more clones and have them help, which of course is what he did. When he did find them, 10 minutes later, he found them struggling against a group of puppets. Shino was performing admirably, his bugs clogging the joints and rendering them unmoving, while Ino's sword was dancing around her, literally deflecting anything the puppets shot at her before cutting them down. It actually appeared that they didn't need him, which troubled Naruto. Just what did that say about him if the two that were supposed to be weaker than him were doing better than he was? Then he saw it, two traps springing at the same time, and he acted without thinking. Two cage bunshin popped into existence, each performing a kawarimi with a startled Ino and Shino, which allowed two massive logs to complete their swings safely. Then on the heels of this, Naruto concentrated once more and pulled off yet another futon, Datapa scattering the remaining attack puppets into the forest and nearly knocking both of his teammates over in the process. Finished and grinning, Naruto broke cover and landed between the two. Hi, looked like you guys needed some help. Looked like? Ino repeated dryly, putting her sword up, fixing him with an intense glare. We were nearly killed. You had to go storming off in a huff, leaving us alone in a forest with so many damn traps that it's a wonder we're still alive. Boy, I just saved your asses and now you're gonna blame me? Naruto shouted back, eye twitching. Might I suggest that instead of arguing we attempt to figure out what exactly we should do now? Shino said softly, moving between them to act as a mediator. Fine, Ino sniffed, crossing her arms. Whatever, Naruto nodded, kicking at the ground in annoyance, willing to back off for the moment. Ino still annoyed the hell out of him though, and he was seriously considering shaving her head. It does appear that we are out of our element, Shino continued stoically, as ever. Perhaps we should withdraw and see if we can not speak with someone about this. You want to give up? Naruto said blankly, staring at the boy, and then glanced at a startled, but relieved, looking Ino. It is the only logical choice, Shino said with a small shrug. We cannot function properly in this environment, thus the wisest course is to seek help and try again later. Yeah, Ino said, almost uncertain. Besides, why should we have to trek through this insane forest to get those stupid applications? I mean, I know I can handle myself a bit better, but I don't think we're ready for this exam. Naruto blinked, looking between them, his stomach churning at what he was hearing. They wanted to give up and run away? How could they? No, why would they? Frowning, he absently clenched his fist, his thoughts on everything he had heard and felt in those few minutes focusing into one thought, not giving up. I can't believe you seriously want to go back and give up? Well, screw that. Lifting his head, he met both of their gazes, his voice strained with anger and determination. I'm tired of people telling me what I can't do. That I can't be a ninja. That I can't reach my dreams. I'm going to get to that damn application. I'm gonna sign it, and I'm going to present it, and then I'm going to keep kicking ass until that old man has to make me Hokage. You seriously believe you can do that? No, I know we can. Naruto said fiercely. If we can stop fighting each other and work together, we can kick this forest's ass. Maybe, Shino allowed it. Boy, we're a team, there is no possibility about it. Naruto said, glaring at the boy. So are we going to get those applications or not? Damn it, Ino muttered, sounding almost happy, let's go. When the idiot's right, he's right. Hey, Naruto shouted, fighting his urge to stick his tongue out at her when he noticed what appeared to be a teasing smile. Instead, he looked at Shino, asking without saying a word if he was with them or not. The bug user nodded slightly, hands in his pockets. If we are going to be properly rested tomorrow, we need to move now. Right, Naruto said excitedly, before scratching the back of his head. So, triangle formation? It seems like a good idea, who should point? Naruto blinked, his mind finally catching up with what was going on. I guess you? 'Cause you know you'd notice the traps first? Or at least before Blondie over there. What was that? Ino shot back, before flipping her hair back over her shoulder. You're a blonde too, you know. Oi, but I'm a guy blonde, Naruto shot back cheekily, as they took off means I'm 1% smarter than girl blondes. Does not. Does so. Take it back or so help me I'm going to. See, that proves it. You can't even think of a good threat, Naruto cut her off, laughing. Anko was drunk. Not fall down drunk, and not slightly buzzed, but almost a happy medium. There was a drunken sway to her walk, a slurring of her speech, almost a sense of detachment from the world. She was no less deadly, of course, but still, she was drunk, and her reaction time was somewhat off-kilter. Nobody, however, could say she was a quiet drunk. Singing, shouting, torturing Kakashi, who had unwisely agreed to a date for his book, it had all been an event of the night. Now, of course, back in her apartment, settling in for her third night of blissful sleep, she had set about devouring her entire stock of dango. Therein was her first mistake. For of course she was by far too idealistic to believe that in the nearly 12 hours that she had been out, Naruto and his team would not have returned to the village. Or more to the point, that Naruto, the #1 prankster in Konoha, would not get revenge for tossing them into Akigahara. It was not until her stomach gave an ominous rumbling, after 3 hours of devouring dango, that she realized that something could be wrong. Abandoning her meal and climbing to her feet, she felt a sharp pain and paused, her suspicious nature coming to the forefront. Swaying her way through the living room and into the kitchen, she swept her gaze around the counters and the off-white refrigerator. Flipping a light on, she stumbled into the kitchen, giving it all a much closer inspection. Nothing seemed out of place, nor did the dango appear tampered with. Yet somehow she knew that something had been done, something that was about to have very disastrous results. For her stomach suddenly felt like lead. Exerting her will over her now nearly traitorous stomach, Anko settled her gaze on her trash can. Walking over, a hand resting on her stomach with sweat standing out on her skin, she lifted the lid. There on the very top of the trash was a box, an over-the-counter box, of medicine. Picking the box up, she began to read, slowly working out the words. Konoha's #1 extra strength chocolate laxative. Anko paused, frowning, as the last word took a moment to register. Then, as the words reached her, she felt a sharp pain shoot through her, and she dropped the box, eyes wide. The drunk Jmin spun and made a mad dash for the bathroom. After nearly tearing the bathroom door off the hinges and then slamming the bathroom door shut, it was at this point that Anko decided she would have to kill No, use a spoon to cut the heart out of Naruto. Why? Because she discovered, belatedly, her second mistake. She had not checked the toilet seat for plastic wrap. Thanks for watching my video. Leave a like if you enjoyed my video, and also do consider subscribing to my channel for more awesome content. If you want the next part of this story, let me know in the comment box. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.